The animation for RWBY has had its ups and downs over the years. As I've stated before, the action animation was the primary focus for the early volumes, while more recent volumes put more emphasis on the character and non-action animation. RWBY Volume 6 seeks to better the balance between the action and character animation, all the while doing pieces of animation they've done in some shape or form before, but better. Volume 6 even has a massive change to one of its pillars of animation I have yet to talk about in a video or anywhere really. I'll start off with Volume 6's character animation, which is still stellar. The way characters move and emote look fantastic. I especially like the way Nora pops around. I think the animators really like animating Nora due to how high energy and frantic she can become. One of the pieces of animation that is done better than before is the animation of a character waving their arms around frantically. Both have the character's arms multiplied, but it is executed a lot better here in Volume 6. One thing I have yet to do when discussing the character animation is actually analyze and break down a sequence of animation. I think this is because there hasn't been a full set of animation that truly wowed me. There have always been moments during a scene that did move me. For example, Weiss curling up when she is about to open up to Yang about her family situation in Episode 8 of Volume 5. Volume 6 actually has a sequence of animation that caught my attention, and it is the animation on display when Jean comes at Oscar over what Oz was hiding. You probably think I'm going to talk about Jean's animation since he is the main focus for most of the shots, but no. I'm actually going to analyze the animation for Oscar. The animators did a stellar job at conveying Oscar's different states of emotion throughout the scene. His initial confusion when Jean calls out his statement on not being, quote-unquote, the bad guys. How he is unable to look at Jean directly because of how aggressive and in Oscar's face Jean is being. This shows how uncomfortable and scared he is. The way he holds up his hands while his eyes are closed as Jean realizes what he is doing. Oscar is trying to show Jean that he means no harm, yet Oscar is still afraid to look at Jean. His eyes open soon after, but he looks up and away from Jean multiple times. He is still unsure if Jean has calmed down, so he can't fully look back up at Jean. He then flinches as Jean turns to walk up the stairs just because Jean got somewhat closer. Oscar barely says a word, yet his animation says so much. Before I get into the action animation Volume 6, I want to cover one of the principles of animation that RWBY started doing more of with Volume 4, which is squash and stretch. I first brought this up with my video discussing the new look of RWBY in Volume 4. I showed how this principle was previously utilized for the attacks, and that fast motion was emphasized with a blur effect. The problems for Volume 4's implementation of this principle are that its use sometimes was unnecessary or too much was applied. There were good instances of squash and stretch. It was just the execution and use of this principle being not as well implemented as it could have been. As I stated earlier, Volume 6's animation goes to do things better than they were before. The use of squash and stretch in Volume 6 is a lot better and is used not only in the action animation, but also the non-action character animation. There are plenty of moments where the animators use squash and stretch to great effect. I find it particularly hilarious that they animate Adrian like a snake while he is causing a ruckus.
Get my back, okay? What airport are we going to?
What do you think about this, bitch? Oh, ruckus! Ruckus!
Here's some ruckus.
Steak! I got the steak! Oh, I got the ruckus!
I just attacked the army with a baseball bat!
One of the times I saw an implementation of squash and stretch actually took me by surprise. It's in this shot of Nora for Episode 2. This is very different to any example I have shown so far. This is because what is being done here is an example of a smear frame. A smear frame is a major exaggeration of squash and stretch and is used for extremely fast motion. Examples of this typically have the character's body majorly deformed with specific body parts multiplied in some instances, like eyes. These two shots of Nora is the first time I've seen an example of this in RWBY. You can say that some of the examples I have shown before are smear frames, but none of them have taken it quite this far. Improper implementation of these kinds of frames can be detrimental. In any case, they can bring so much energy to the animation, which is especially good in Nora's case. The action animation for Volume 6 is definitely better than Volume 5's overall. The issues with Volume 5's action animation were mainly a lack of urgency and impact. Volume 6 doesn't have this problem, at least not as much as Volume 5 did. They are getting there, just not quite yet. Most of Volume 6's action animation is actually pretty good, give and take a few issues here and there. The main problem I found with Volume 5's action animation is that lack of urgency. The actions the characters take just look sluggish, with no purpose behind them. Volume 6 actually doesn't have this problem as much as Volume 5 did. The action during the fights between Neo and Cinder, Huntress Maria and Tak, and, of course, Adam against Blank and Yang are all quick, with each of the characters moving with a good amount of urgency. The action scene I found the most issues with is actually the battle on the train. Most of the action here is fine, but there are just moments that look off or don't work as well as intended. One of the moments that don't look that good is Weiss ice skating on her glyphs. She's floating above the glyphs rather than being in contact with them, and her skating animation just looks awkward. This is also a change to our understanding on how Weiss's glyphs work. Prior to this volume, they would make it so the person running on the glyphs would be planted to their surface and move at a faster rate. If they are going to make it so Weiss can skate along the glyphs, it would be better to treat the glyphs like a roller coaster and have Weiss just slide along them. They should look at the animation for IGPX, Blockade, Battlefront, and The Last Airbender for references to the kind of look and movement I'm referring to. Hold on! RWBY, did you look into the future and see I was going to make this argument, or did you read my Tumblr post suggesting this very thing? Anyway, another issue is in the decision to have this shot of Weiss forcing the Grimm to RWBY, who would then send it flying to the other Grimm attacking Oscar. The issue here is not the animation itself, but more its presentation. The indicator for this is the shot in which the camera is behind Weiss and RWBY. The problem is that you can't tell if Weiss's attack actually landed or if the Grimm avoided Weiss. The reason for this is how you have Weiss, a character with a cool colored design, striking with a gray colored weapon with a white slash for the effect of the attack, on top of a very light blue whitish background. This makes it so Weiss and her attack can easily be lost to the background. This design problem, along with the camera's position, are what makes it hard to actually see Weiss's attack land and force the Grimm towards RWBY. The early action against the Finks are particularly good, however, the biggest problem when it comes to the action of this episode deals with how the Grimm is ultimately defeated. The ways in which Grimm are defeated haven't been particularly great for the past couple of volumes, but this one is the worst of them. The problem is how the Grimm does absolutely nothing but stand there as Blake, Yang, and Weiss break it down. It doesn't actually decide to do anything until moments before Crow and RWBY move in for the killing blow. Yang slides under the Grimm. It could turn to Yang to swipe its claws, bite, or stick its tail on her, but does none of those. Blake and Yang are on either side of it with all those same options available, with the bonus of having the tail fend off one of the two. Doesn't do any of that. Weiss is right in front of it, taking out its wings. It could thrash at her, bite, or even shoot a fireball, but it doesn't. It finally does something only after it has been set up for Crow and RWBY to kill it. The problem here is that the Grimm isn't active in attacking our heroes or even defending itself. We can go all the way back to Volume 1 to see how fights against the Grimm should be. Here, the Grimm are not passively waiting for the students to move into position or whittle them down. They actively attack the students and defend themselves. The reason these Grimm are defeated is because the two teams take the opportunities presented to them or do something to hold the Grimm in place so that it can be finished. One problem that is more of a personal gripe than anything is that I don't agree with the decision to have Crow perform the same move as RWBY when they go to finish off the Sphinx. RWBY can still do the spin move, but I would rather have Crow just do a large, powerful swing of his scythe. I get it. RWBY was trained by Crow and modeled her weapon after his. It's just that I would rather see how they use their weapons differently to achieve the same end. RWBY isn't that strong, which is why she uses the kick of her sniper to increase the force of her swing. Crow, on the other hand, is very strong. His swings already carry a lot of weight to them. I just don't think he needs that extra kick. The best action scene of the volume is, of course, Yang vs. Adam. One would think that this is due to the fact that they implemented Monty's old test animation for a fight between Adam and Yang, but that would be underselling the great action animation found throughout the fight. The action here is fast and intense, with a bunch of smart back and forth between Yang and Adam. Yang bobbing and weaving under Adam's attacks, Adam taking a shot at Yang while his back is turned. There is even a moment where Adam throws a feint and tries to take another shot at Yang with his rifle. The reason the feint fails is because Yang didn't just try to dodge Adam's blade, she also kept her guard up. The most interesting thing about the way Yang fights is how much she maintains her guard. There's another moment where Yang lands a punch after leaping in the air, kicks Adam, but she doesn't follow up with a punch. She instead notices that Adam is going to retaliate and immediately puts up her guard and dodges it. The cinematography is also well done, as the action is framed in such a way that just about every action is readable. Take Yang countering Adam as an example. The shot is initially behind Yang and to her right. This gives plenty of negative space for us to see the swing of Adam's katana. This also gives us a good angle to see Yang stop Adam by grabbing his wrist and twisting it over his head. The camera now pans around to the side of Yang and Adam to frame up Yang's punch to the back, elbow and knee to the gut, and finally a punch to the face, which happens right in the center of the frame. We also get to see some nice tricks that help sell the action. This can be seen with Yang's multiple punches. The way they have the punches hit one after another so quickly is by duplicating Yang's arms. When one arm reels back, the duplicate is throwing another punch. I also really like the arch of Yang's last punch, which is brilliantly emphasized with a flame effect since she is punching with the gauntlet on her left arm. One animation that really impressed me is Yang running in place after shooting herself around Adam. Yang propels herself at Adam, but dodges Adam's attack and does a spin kick. She then uses her weapons to quickly move herself out of the way of Adam's retaliations. Because she moves so quickly, Yang has to struggle in order to get back in. Why this is impressive to me is that they could have just had Yang snap back in, but instead choose to make it a struggle. Essentially, Yang is struggling against the momentum that just propelled her into this position. I would compare this to the Bakugo vs Deku fight from My Hero Academia Season 3. Here, the power buildup of One for All is what is pushing back against the force that just pushed against Deku. Monty-wise, we see them implement the multi-clone slash, the use of clones to disorient Yang, and the 3 Iaidos. The multi-clone slash starts the fight off and is really well done due to how Yang reacts. She dodges the first slash, deflects the second, dodges the next 2, and blocks the last 3. The animation for Adam is also really intense and is emphasized by how far Yang gets pushed back after the onslaught. I also really like how black the effects get while Adam is using his semblance. The shots of Adam using his clones to disorient Yang are pretty different from the test footage. This sequence includes shots of Yang trying to keep track of Adam. The ground stab does change from Adam doing so while on the ground to Adam being in the air first and the aforementioned stab generating a shockwave. One nice detail about the shockwave is a distortion effect being placed around its origin. This emphasizes how hot and intense the attack is. The 3 drawing slashes are particularly interesting because the animation doesn't have Adam fully draw the katana out from its sheath. One would think this is a problem, but Adam is animated to fully draw the blade on the last slash, which means that this is deliberate. So why does this work? Basically, we are falling for an illusion or sleight of hand. The design of this sequence of animation is done in such a way that we won't notice that Adam hasn't fully drawn his katana. There are 3 reasons for this. First up is the sound design. I typically don't bring this up when discussing animation, but this plays an obvious role in suspending the audience's disbelief. What happens in the sound design in each of the 3 attacks is that they get more intense with each swing. Listen. This is to help audibly convey and sell the audience on the power of the attacks. Next up is the motion of the attacks, which each have 4 distinct phases. These phases are anticipation, draw, attack, and resheath. Looking at just the first attack, Adam is initially in anticipation for around 2 to 3 frames. His body turned away from Yang. Adam then turns his torso towards Yang and begins drawing the sword. This takes 1 frame to complete before Adam's attack hits Yang. Adam holds this pose for another 3 frames as the effects for the slash and impact are played. Just as the effects are dissipating, Adam is resheathing his katana, which takes another 2 frames. This totals the first attack as being completed in 10 frames, which is about a third of a second. The last 2 attacks go through the same phases and are all completed in just over a second. What this means is that the attacks go by so quickly that we don't have time to notice the 3 frames that Adam holds the drawing pose for. What I find most interesting is Adam holding this pose as the effects for the attack play. This is to make it so there are no distracting motions for the effects of the attack. It's also as if Adam has already swung the blade and started resheathing it before the attack actually lands. One thing of note is how some of the individual phases for the next 2 attacks will take an extra frame or so to complete. This is because of the last reason for how this illusion is accomplished: the effects. The effects for Adam's attacks play an important role in visually selling the attacks. Because Adam isn't fully drawing the katana out of its sheath, the effects have to pick up the slack. The effects are prominent and will draw our attention away from Adam. Once the effects are done, our eyes will return to Adam, who has already started resheathing his blade. Remember how I mentioned a minute ago how some of the phases of the attacks take slightly longer to complete than the previous? Well, this is to build up the power for the effects. The last one being doubly more powerful than the previous 2, and has the blade fully drawn as Adam stays in this pose while the effects play and Yang is pushed back. Notice how Adam holds his last pose. This is to help sell the power suggested by the effects. So, the reasons why this sleight of hand works are because the sound design convinces us that the attacks did, in fact, happen, the animation goes by too quickly for us to notice, and the effects draw our attention away from Adam. If you want more on this, listen to this excerpt from the Hollow Knight video put out by New Frame Plus that covers effects animation.
Again, I'm not meaning to downplay the importance of Bug Knight's character animation. The tilt of their mask and the changes in their line of action help to sell so many of their movements. But if you took the effects animation and the sound out of these moves, they would not feel powerful. Heck, half of them wouldn't even read. Look what happens when I take the sound and effects away from just the basic attack. It doesn't even look like anything anymore.
Now, this scene does have its problems. Early on, Adam sends out an air slash that he then follows up by throwing his blade at Yang. The problem here is that you can't see the air slash during the second shot of this sequence. The reason for this is because the shot cuts from Adam to Yang after Yang has already sidestepped it. The air slash is only in this shot for a single frame, so there isn't time for the audience to see it when the new shot begins. It would have been better to cut on the moment Adam finished sending out the air slash and have the next shot show Yang dodging it and Adam following up by throwing his weapon. There is also a moment where the action comes to a screeching halt, so Blake can explain Adam's semblance to Yang. This comes after Adam just unleashed a shockwave forcing Yang back. The shot also copies the shot composition of a moment that does the exact same thing back in episode 13 of Volume 5, in which Oz explains Hazel's power to Nora. This shot is a bit better than the one in the fight between Yang and Adam, because Nora had just tossed Hazel and is going to need time to recover. In the fight against Adam, Adam has nothing stopping him from continuing the attack. There are, of course, some animation errors and inconsistencies. At the end of the multi-clone slash, a portion of Adam's clothing becomes transparent. This may be because the renderer couldn't properly handle the 3 models of Adam occupying the same space. There is also a moment where Adam takes a shot at Yang, but there is not an effect showing whether the shot misses or hits Yang. There is an inconsistency at the start of the fight where Adam is facing Yang perpendicular to the platform they are on, but is then fighting her parallel to it. The scene remains consistent after that, but another one happens after Blake explains Adam's semblance. Yang is to the left of Blake during the explanation, but in the next shot when the action starts back up, Yang is to the right. She is then placed back to the left in the next shot. Hey, this is Faboover recording a little bit in the middle of editing here. The reason for this is to point out a mistake that I had made in regards to what I had just said about the position of Yang during this scene. So, to explain the problem, I was actually incorrect about Yang's positioning here in relation to Blake. She is not actually to Blake's left in this scene. She is to her left in the frame, but in actuality, this would not be true for what I said going forward from there, where she would change to the right, as in this shot here. The only small change here is Yang is a bit further back than she was in this shot. So if Yang was actually pushed all the way to the left of Blake in this instance, the camera would be actually facing the waterfall in the background here a lot more, and Yang would probably be more over to this left side rather than where she is currently. So what I said here is, for this little portion, is actually not correct. What I did say going forward here, I am correct on. This is a change to how things are in the scene, because she is now full on to the left of where Blake is. Blake is over to the right, off frame here. So yeah, I just want to record this little bit to correct myself while I'm editing. Excuse me. To say that I was wrong saying that Yang is to the left of Blake in this shot. That's incorrect. She is to the right. The one inconsistency there is that Yang gets changed to being over to the left during this shot. Thank you. I'll get back to editing the video now, and hopefully it won't be so far after this current date at the bottom right, which is the 25th of June. Thank you. Now, when it comes to the inconsistencies of Volume 6, I actually didn't find them as often as I did for Volumes 4 and 5. This may be due to the fact that the CRWBY took extra special care to make the scenes as consistent as possible.
We need to do all of this mainly for continuity. We hand these files off to animation. Everybody needs to be on the same page about placement.
Kate, who is one of the lead layout artists who's in charge of making sure that all this continuity is great, and who does amazing staging maps for every episode and everything, loves continuity. But you do, though.
I do. I really do.
Yeah.
I like accountability and things to fall in line.
People to blame.
Me.
No.
Just kidding.
Me and Joe.
Unfortunately, there were still some that fell through the cracks. Surprisingly, I did find some in the non-action scenes, like Weiss and Blake switching places in Episode 2. There was a shot in Episode 9 that happened to have an NPC be layered on top of the environment that was pointed out by a user on Twitter when the preview for the episode was shown. This issue was fixed upon release, but Saffron's foot is shown to be in front of the building as she walks away. Saffron did also have the layering issue in the preview, but why is it just the bottom of the foot now? I feel this may have been an issue with the renderer or some issue with the modeling and design of the building. I can't think of any other reason. Anyway, it is good to see them taking the consistency of their scenes more seriously. They just need to be more attentive. For my final topic of this video, I'm going to cover an aspect of RWBY's animation that I haven't spent a lot of time with before, and that is the special effects. The special effects for Volume 6 have had a major change, mainly that almost all of them are 2D animations. I first took notice of this with the fire animation for the fireplace in Episode 5. That's quite a change from the typical implementation of the fire special effects that we have seen in Volumes 4 and 5, which were typically a combination of particle and fluid simulations. This is why the fire animation in episode 5 was so shocking to see. I first felt like the reason for this change was to have a more subdued flame due to the tone of the scene, but I soon realized that all of the fire effects in Volume 6 were 2D. This is not to say the use of 2D effects is bad in RWBY. I just found it weird to make a change like this when they already had an established look for fire. I would say the fire animation here is bad due to how obvious a 2D element it is, which broke my immersion for the scene. However, the fire animation in the next episode looks great. The flames are bright and cover the apathy in their entirety. The animation is also fluid and dynamic, to the point that it doesn't look like it is just repeating the same animation over and over again. Most of the effects in Volume 6 do their job and look great from time to time. Especially the effects animation for Adam using his semblance to send out a giant shockwave towards Yang during their fight. But of course, there are some that drop the ball. Two of which are the splash effects for the cannon missile fire in open water and Yang's motorcycle falling into the river. The problem with the one used for the missiles is that the animation is too symmetrical compared to the angle of the missile fire, which isn't a problem for the splash in the river. An additional problem comes afterwards when RWBY and Weiss come out of the giant splash of water. The effect for them coming out is minuscule, and there isn't a water trail showing that they just flew through the water. Jumping to the splash on the river, the splash doesn't have the same problem as the missile fire because Yang's bike is falling in a more vertical fashion, so the effect being symmetrical isn't a problem. What is a problem is that there isn't a ripple effect added in due to the displacement of the water. This isn't a problem for the giant splash because there is an attempt at something similar at the base of the effect. Also, the water flow in the river isn't shown to be affected by the bike falling in. You can tell because the light reflection on the water doesn't change around the vicinity of the splash. A detail like that would have been nice to see. One effect that isn't bad, but would not have been what I would have done, is the impact effects for Yang's semblance-fueled counter against Adam at the end of the fight between Blake, Yang, and Adam. It's just that Yang has been storing up her semblance for this moment, and it isn't as big or impactful as Adam's. I would have tried to bring it to 11, like the effects animation for Adam's giant shockwave, while also using an impact frame as a callback to the yellow trailer. That would have been awesome! There are 3D effects being utilized in RWBY Volume 6. 3D effects seem to only be used when it comes to 3D models like rocks and ice, or with fluid simulations. For example, the Leviathan rising out of the water is accomplished through a fluid simulation. This is particularly good due to the change in color of the water from blue to white that replicates reality because of how water disperses while in the air. So I actually had a lot more planned for this section, but the video is getting too long. Therefore, I'll be discussing other aspects of the special effects animation for RWBY in more detail in my next video that discusses the design of RWBY Volume 6. I got a bunch of resources and commentaries to grab and look through, and most of them I was able to find thanks to Hypeathon, who did the video series on Monty's Vision a while back on YouTube, so please look forward to it. Now let's get this video over with. RWBY Volume 6's animation is the best the animation has been overall for the entire series. The character animation isn't anywhere as janky or cringe-inducing as the early volumes that were animated in Poser, but they did get really nice by Volume 3. The action animation is back to being on par with those early volumes, and finally reached the same highs as some of the best fight scenes that can be found in Volume 2. There are still issues with the scenes, like some lackluster choreography, animation errors and inconsistencies, and other questionable decisions. However, the choreography is a lot superior to what we got in most of the fight scenes for the last two volumes, especially when you compare them to what we got for the last 4 episodes in Volume 5. The better use of animation techniques, like squash and stretch, is also good to see. I really was surprised to see a smear frame implemented on a 3D character model. I'm really interested to see how they will implement it again in the future. I am happy to see that they are taking the consistency of scenes a lot more seriously. I didn't catch these inconsistencies as often as I have had for the last 2 volumes. The effects animation is quite a change, but doesn't bother me and does do a good job as I explained earlier. Again, more on those in my next video. Now, as I always end my videos, here are some questions I would like to hear your thoughts on. Were there any sequences of animation that you found to be well done or lacking? Action and non-action. Was there anything that you found interesting for the animation of this volume in regards to its design and implementation? Where would you like to see the animation improve? What are your thoughts on the special effects for RWBY as a series? Head on down to the comments below and let me know.